Water at dawn. Real or stock footage of Strait of Hormuz every single morning. Before you drink your coffee, before you start your car, 21 million barrels of oil pass through a stretch of water so narrow you could almost throw a stone across it. This is the Strait of Hormuz, 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, and right now, Iran is threatening to close it forever. What happens if they succeed? Your gas doubles, Europe runs dry, Asia grinds to a halt. And the US military, already positioned, will be forced to make its most dangerous decision in decades. East to Europe, Asia, USA, let's start with the basics, because most people have no idea how dependent the world actually is on this one tiny waterway. 20% of all the oil traded in the entire world passes through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. Not 20% of Middle East oil, 20% of oil on Earth. Japan gets 90% of its energy through this strait, South Korea, 80%, India, 60%. Even Europe, which has spent years trying to reduce its Middle East dependency, still gets 30% of its oil from here. Now look at the geography. Iran sits on the entire northern coastline of this strait. They have missile batteries, submarine bases, and drone launch sites positioned along every kilometer of that shore. Iran doesn't need a massive navy to threaten this strait. They need small, fast boats, cheap drones, and sea mines, all of which they have in enormous quantities. The last time there was a serious threat to Gulf oil, back in 1973, gas prices in America quadrupled in 3 months. Factories shut down, airlines canceled flights, economies went into recession. That was with just one embargo. A full Hormuz closure would be 10 times worse. Protesters in Iranian streets, so why is Iran threatening to close the strait now? To understand that, you need to understand how desperate Iran's situation actually is. US sanctions have crushed Iran's economy. Their currency has lost over 80% of its value in the last 6 years. Inflation is running above 40%. Oil exports, Iran's main source of income, have been cut to a fraction of what they once were. Iran's strategy has always been, don't fight America directly. Instead, surround your enemies with proxies. Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. For years, this worked perfectly, but in the last 18 months, that strategy has been systematically dismantled. Hezbollah's leadership was decimated. Houthi positions have been struck repeatedly by US and British forces. Iranian military commanders have been killed inside Iranian territory. With its proxies weakened and its economy broken, closing the strait is Iran's last real card. It's a threat that says, if we go down, we take the global economy with us. The United States has been preparing for this scenario for years. And the response that is already in place is on a scale most people don't realize. Right now, the US has 2 aircraft carrier strike groups positioned within striking distance of Iran. Each carrier group includes destroyers, submarines, and aircraft capable of executing strikes within minutes, 1,000 kilometers of Iranian targets. That cuts strike time dramatically compared to flying from the continental United States. But here's what makes this situation different from any previous Gulf crisis. Technology has completely changed the equation. Iran's primary weapon for closing the strait is sea mines. In the past, clearing mines required putting human divers and slow ships into extremely dangerous water. Today, the US and its allies have autonomous underwater drones that can scan the seabed with millimeter precision, detect mines, and neutralize them without putting a single sailor at risk. A coalition of more than 35 countries, including France, the UK, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, has publicly committed to keeping the strait open. This is not just a US-Iran confrontation. This is Iran versus essentially the entire global economy. Now here is the part of this story that almost nobody in Western media is covering properly. The Gulf Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, are not passive bystanders in this crisis. They are the ones with the most at stake. Think about it from their perspective. Saudi Arabia's entire oil export infrastructure sits directly across the water from Iran. UAE ports, some of the busiest in the world, would be paralyzed the moment Hormuz closes. Kuwait's economy depends almost entirely on oil exports through this same strait. This is why Gulf countries have been quietly but aggressively upgrading their military capabilities for years. Saudi Arabia now operates one of the most advanced air defense networks in the world, including American Patriot batteries that have already intercepted hundreds of Houthi missiles and drones. The UAE has THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System. This is the same system the US uses to defend against ballistic missiles. The Gulf states didn't wait to be protected. They invested billions to protect themselves. And here is something truly strategic that almost nobody talks about. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have already built oil pipelines specifically designed to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline can move 5 million barrels per day directly to the Red Sea. The UAE's Habshan Fujairah pipeline moves oil to the Gulf of Oman, completely bypassing Iranian waters. This doesn't solve the entire problem. Global demand still exceeds these bypass capacities. But it means a Hormuz closure would hurt Iran far more than many analysts expected, because Gulf oil would still partially flow, while Iran's own exports would be completely cut off. So where does this go from here? There are three realistic scenarios. Scenario 1. Diplomatic resolution. Iran agrees to nuclear limitations in exchange for sanctions relief. The strait stays open. Oil prices stabilize. The military buildup slowly retreats. This is what happened in 2015 with the nuclear deal. It could happen again, but both sides are currently further apart than they were then. Iran makes threats but stops short of actually closing the strait. The US maintains its military presence. Oil prices stay elevated but don't collapse. This is actually the most likely scenario. Neither side wants full war, but it's also the most unstable, because one miscalculation could trigger Scenario 3. Scenario 3. Military escalation. Iran attempts to mine the strait or strike a US or allied vessel. The US responds with airstrikes on Iranian naval and missile infrastructure. Oil prices spike past $200 per barrel. Global recession follows within weeks. Every military analyst watching this situation closely says the same thing. Iran knows it cannot win a direct military confrontation with the United States, but it also knows that the economic damage of closing the strait, even temporarily, might be enough to force a negotiated settlement on better terms. That is the calculation Tehran is making right now. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide. But the decisions being made about it right now will affect every country on Earth. Whether you live in New York or Nairobi, London or Lahore, the price you pay for food, for fuel, for almost everything you buy is being decided in these waters. We will be covering every development in this crisis as it unfolds. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and tell us in the comments which scenario do you think is most likely.